Welcome to a journey not meant for the faint of heart. Imagine this. You're sitting alone in a familiar room. The light is dim. Outside, the night is thick and silent, broken only by the sound of wind slipping through the cracks in your window. Have you ever felt, even for a fleeting moment, that something wasn't quite right? A faint sound, a soft knock, a distant laugh, or a shadow that passes by where no one should be. But when you look, there's nothing there. Or so you think. Tonight, we're stepping beyond that moment of doubt, into stories that aren't just tales. They're fractures in the surface of our world, where darkness isn't just empty space. It lives, it breathes, and sometimes it looks back at you. I'll be your guide through 22 chilling true horror stories, or at least those who lived through them swear they're true. From old suburban homes in St. Louis where the sound of children's laughter echoes from a cold basement, to apartments in Portland, where no matter how many times you turn the key, the door refuses to stay locked. We'll wander into the remote forests of the Adirondacks, where tapping at the window doesn't come from any branch. And we'll face glowing eyes in the shadows of the Smoky Mountains. Eyes that don't leave, no matter how bright your flashlight is. These aren't fairy tales. There are no happy endings here. These are whispers from those who've seen, who've heard, who've run, only to learn some things don't stay behind. But before we begin, ask yourself, do you dare listen to them all? Each story is a piece of something bigger, a door deeper into the dark. And once you've heard them, you might start noticing strange sounds in your own home. Maybe it's just the floorboards creaking, or the faucet dripping in the kitchen. But maybe, just maybe, it's the first sign of a story that hasn't been told yet. Don't take your eyes off the screen. Don't turn off the lights. Not just yet. Because tonight, we'll uncover the coldest, most bone-chilling mysteries I've collected. So steel your nerves. The first door is about to open. And once you step inside, there's no turning back. Let's begin. A few years ago, in the bitter cold of January, Jake, my best friend since high school, and I decided to go hiking through the Black Ridge Mountains in Pennsylvania, a place people say gets so cold in winter that your bones freeze. Several years ago, a friend and I went on a multi-day hiking trip during winter. None of us expected it would turn into something more terrifying than a Hollywood horror movie. Before setting off, I browsed a Reddit forum about this trail. There were dozens of threads about mysterious disappearances. Most users blamed inexperienced hikers getting lost, but one old man named Hank, who claimed to have hiked the trail every year for the past 50 years, insisted that something not human was lurking in the forest. Others laughed at him, but the certainty in his voice gave me chills. We set off before sunrise to get as many miles in as possible on the first day. It was pitch black, with only our flashlights sweeping over the skeletal branches, and the wind, howling like someone was moaning through the trees. Jake was grinning from ear to ear, saying we'd be living legends after this trip. I, on the other hand, felt cold, not from the weather, but from a strange sensation that something was watching us from the darkness, invisible eyes piercing through the thick fog. Just before dawn, I caught a glimpse of a tall, lanky figure standing motionless between two pine trees. No face, no sound. Just a dark silhouette that seemed to swallow all the light around it. I turned to Jake and asked, "Did you see that?" He shook his head and said I was being paranoid from caffeine withdrawal, but my heart was pounding, as if it already knew something was waiting for us ahead. After a long day trudging through snow-covered slopes, my legs ached like 1,000 needles were stabbing into them. The sun had fully set, leaving behind a bleak gray sky over Blackridge. That night, we were surprised by some dangerous terrain near the edge of a frozen lake and decided to sleep in our bivy sacks under an overhanging rock. Not ideal, but with the icy cliff and the frozen lake. Below, we didn't have many options. Jake muttered something about forgetting his iPad to watch Netflix, trying to make me laugh, but I just stared silently into the dark. There was something in the air, a faint, rotting stench, like a long dead animal, though we hadn't seen any wildlife around. I squeezed myself into the cramped sleeping bag, trying to push away the unease. That night I barely slept. My mind was exhausted, but my body was tight as a wire. Then suddenly, I woke to the sound of my friend yelling and cursing at me. Jake's panicked voice cut through the dark. "What the hell are you doing, Chris?" I jumped up, heart racing, and saw Jake still in his sleeping bag. But it had slid dangerously close to the edge of the rock, just inches above the frozen lake. I scrambled up and dragged him back onto level ground, my hands shaking as I pulled the heavy sack. Jake snarled, his face pale. "You pushed me, you asshole." I swore I hadn't touched him. I was asleep. But when I looked down at my sleeping bag, there was a black, wet handprint on the white fabric, as if someone had touched it with a mud-covered hand from the bottom of the lake. Jake saw it too, and both of us just sat there, breath turning to mist, not saying another word. After that handprint incident, neither of us dared to sleep again. It rained hard the entire next day, turning the trail into a muddy mess, and my old injury in my left leg started acting up, slowing us down. By evening, we pitched our tent on a steep hill, trying to stay as far from that cursed lake as possible. But that night, that's when real fear struck. I began to hear what sounded like human footsteps, slow, heavy, circling the tent on the wet earth. I whispered to Jake, "Do you hear that?" He nodded, eyes wide, clutching his hunting knife. I poked my head out of the tent, and the sound instantly stopped. Nothing but the steady sound of rain. But as soon as I ducked back in, the footsteps returned, closer this time, with wheezing breaths like they came from a rotting chest. I peeked through the tent flap and saw it. A tall, gangly figure stood right at the edge of the hill, its head tilted unnaturally like a broken neck, and its arms were impossibly long, swaying low enough to touch the ground. Jake screamed, "It's right there!" But when we rushed outside, there was nothing, just darkness and rain. The footsteps around the tent continued for a long while, and we didn't sleep. Our hearts pounded, waiting for whatever it was to return. Near dawn, a deep guttural growl echoed from the bottom of the hill, like the mountain itself was groaning, and our tent trembled, though there was no wind. As soon as the sun came up, we packed our things and got off the trail, hiking to the nearest village without looking back. When we arrived, Jake swore he'd never return to Blackridge again. As for me, I found a long scratch across my backpack, not from a rock, but from fingernails. That night, in my sleep, I saw the same figure, standing at the foot of my bed, whispering my name in a voice that didn't belong to the living. Some places don't want you there. The land doesn't speak, but it warns. And if you ignore the warning, it waits. My brother and I have always had a ritual. When life got heavy, we'd escape to the desert. Not just any desert, our spot. A sunken valley hidden off the main road, surrounded by jagged cliffs and dried riverbeds. We called it the Hollow. No signal, no other campers, no light for miles. It was perfect, until it wasn't. This trip started like the others. We arrived just before sunset, hiking down the ridge as orange light bled across the sky. We laughed, tossed our gear down near a dried pond, and built a small fire under a natural rock arch that looked like a serpent's jaw. But as the light faded, something felt wrong. It wasn't obvious at first, just off. The fire didn't crackle as loud as usual. The wind, usually sharp and cold, was completely still, like we were inside a vacuum. The desert was quiet, too quiet. "I don't like this," I finally said. My brother didn't answer. He was staring toward the darkening cliffs, jaw clenched. "I think we're being watched," he whispered. We'd never been scared out there before. We knew the desert. We trusted it. But now, the air felt heavy, static, like something ancient was awake beneath the surface. Around midnight, I stepped away from the fire to use the bathroom. That's when I heard it. A dragging sound, dry, gritty, like skin against sand. At first, I thought it was an animal, a coyote maybe. But the sound was too slow, too rhythmic, like something long and heavy being pulled forward, inch by inch. Then I saw it. At the edge of the dried pond, maybe 30 feet away, a shape, thin, crooked, crawling. Its body was half submerged in the cracked earth. Only its arms and part of its head were visible, gliding forward unnaturally. It didn't look up, didn't flinch. It just crawled like it had nowhere to go and all the time in the world to get there. I backed away slowly, trying not to scream. My brother saw my face and stood up fast. "What is it?" he asked. I couldn't speak. I just pointed. When he turned and saw it, his face went pale. Then he said the worst thing I could have heard. "I saw that thing earlier, by the rocks." I thought I imagined it. We packed instantly. No speaking, just movement. The thing didn't follow. It didn't need to. As we zipped our packs, it simply stood up, rising in a jerky, broken way like its joints bent wrong. And then, it pointed at us. Not waved, not reached, pointed. And we knew without a word that it had chosen us. We hiked out in silence. Every few steps I looked back. It never moved, but it never disappeared. It stood there, part of the sand, part of the dark, like it had always been. We didn't speak until we reached the car. My brother's hands were shaking as he gripped the steering wheel. "I think it wanted us to see it," he said, like it knew we'd tell people. Spread the fear. I didn't answer. I just stared ahead. A week later, I went online to check a satellite map of the hollow. But the spot we camped at, it was gone. Not hidden, erased. Where the dried pond had been, there was now a perfect black circle, like the earth had collapsed inward. The image data was glitchy, corrupted. Nothing would load clearly around it. I tried again 2 days later. The whole area had been blurred out on the satellite view, like someone wanted it to disappear. I stopped sleeping well after that. I'd lie awake, listening for sounds that shouldn't exist, and eventually, they came. It started with scratching, then soft whispers under the floorboards. Once, I woke up to the unmistakable sound of breathing, right beside my ear. I froze, too scared to turn. The air smelled like rotting algae. I started therapy a month later. Told the doctor I might be hallucinating, maybe suffering from desert trauma. He smiled politely. Asked about my childhood. Took notes. But during our third session, he paused mid-sentence. His expression changed. Then he stood up slowly, walked over to the corner of his office, and picked something off the carpet. Held it up. His voice was barely audible. "Why is there wet sand here?" That night, I dreamt again. But this time, I wasn't in the hollow. I was in my apartment, trapped in bed. I could feel the weight of something climbing onto my chest. Its fingers pressed into my ribs like claws. It leaned down to my face and made a noise I'll never forget. A wet, rattling gurgle, like air struggling through broken lungs. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't scream. We never went back. And sometimes, in the quietest moments before I fall asleep, I swear I hear it again. That dragging, that thing, waiting, and maybe already inside the room. Not all homes are built for the living. Some are just waiting for something to come back. I was 11 when we moved into the crooked house. At least, that's what the locals called it. We didn't know that at the time. All we knew was that my mom, a single mother and part-time nurse, had landed a too-good-to-be-true job offer. Live-in caretaker for a retired professor in the woods of Oregon. Free lodging, stable income, isolated location. We were broke, cornered, and desperate for any lifeline. So we said yes. The road to the house was so overgrown it barely existed. Our car bumped over roots and old gravel, tree branches clawing at the windows like skeletal fingers. Then, just when I thought we'd taken a wrong turn into nowhere, it appeared, perched on a hill like it had been dropped there by mistake. From afar, the house looked wrong, not haunted, just incorrect. The roof sloped at strange angles. The windows weren't symmetrical, some tall and thin, others wide and low. The porch jutted out like a broken jaw. It was like the house had been built from memory by someone who had never actually seen one. The front door opened before we knocked. He stood there, the professor, thin as smoke, pale, wrapped in a long black coat despite the warmth. His eyes didn't match. One was cloudy and unfocused, the other sharp and far too awake. "You made it," he said. "Good. The house doesn't like to wait." My mom smiled, politely. I didn't move. "She's old," he continued, patting the wooden frame as we entered. "This house was built before Oregon had a name, before they mapped the land. Some say the land mapped itself around her. I didn't understand what that meant. Not then. Inside, the air was thick, not dusty but dense, like walking into a dream you can't quite wake from. There were no sharp corners. Every wall curved, every hallway sloped. The ceiling tilted slightly, downward no matter where you stood. Furniture leaned gently, like pulled toward some invisible center. The professor showed us to our quarters. He lived upstairs. We were to stay in the east wing, a long corridor with pale wallpaper that looked like it had once been floral, now just faded smudges. At the very end of the hall was a white door. Unlike the others, this one had no handle, no lock, no gaps beneath it. Just perfectly flush with the wall, like a painting of a door pretending to be real. The professor pointed at it, eyes darker now. "You are never to open that door, even if it opens for you." The first night was silent. Too silent. I'd never known silence like that. No wind, no insects. Just the tick of a grandfather clock somewhere in the belly of the house. It didn't sound like ticking, more like clicking bones. I dreamt of rooms that folded into themselves, of doors that breathed, of someone walking past my bedroom without footsteps. When I told my mom, she dismissed it as nerves. But she looked tired, pale, and more withdrawn, each day. 2 weeks in, things shifted. I began noticing things that shouldn't move, but did, like the light switches, changing sides of the wall overnight, or the hallway, sometimes longer, sometimes shorter. Once, I swear the staircase turned, left instead of right, and when I blinked, it was back again. But the worst part wasn't the house. It was the mirrors. They didn't reflect what was behind me. They showed what was next. One morning, I stared into the long mirror at the end of the hall, brushing my teeth. Behind me, I saw my mom, wearing a different shirt, standing still, her eyes fully black. I turned. She wasn't there. When I looked back, the mirror was just my reflection again. I started avoiding the white door, but some nights I woke up to a cold hum like metal under strain, and sometimes, only sometimes, the white door would pulse like it was breathing. That was when I realized we weren't alone in the house, and maybe we never had been. The third week was when time began to split. It started small, spoons missing from drawers, only to appear again the next day, shadows moving faster than the people casting them. I'd hear the same knock on the back door every evening at 5:32 p.m. sharp, but no one would be there. The sound was always identical, exactly 3 knocks. Then the clocks disagreed. We had 3 in the house, 1 in the living room, 1 on the staircase landing, and 1 in the kitchen. By the 4th week, they all displayed different times and no one could set them right. The professor said nothing, only smiled more often. But his smiles looked increasingly like warnings. I started keeping a notebook, drawing floor plans of the house. I'd walk the hallways, count my steps, note window positions. But each morning my sketches were different. Extra rooms, missing windows, hallways that curved when they used to be straight. Once, I walked into the pantry and came out. In the bathroom upstairs, I didn't scream. I just sat there on the cold tile floor, breathing slowly, afraid that time had taken a wrong turn and left me behind. Then, there was the night I found my mother crying in the hallway. Not just crying, panicking, clawing at the wallpaper. "Where's my room?" she whispered. "Where's my room, baby?" "Mom, it's just..." I pointed behind her toward the door she'd slept behind for weeks. But it was gone. A blank wall stood where the door had been, the wallpaper seamless, untouched. I blinked, and the door was back. But Mom didn't see. Her hand passed right through it like it was smoke. She screamed so hard she collapsed. That night, I dreamed of the white door again. But this time, it was open. I stood in the threshold, staring into a room that had no floor, no ceiling, just a spiral of flickering lights and impossible geometry. It looked like a cathedral folded in on itself, echoing with thousands of ticking clocks, all out of sync. A version of me stood inside the spiral. He had no face, just a mirror for a head. "You were never meant to leave," he said. "You came in, but you never came out." When I woke up, there was dirt under my fingernails, and on the floor by my bed, footprints, bare, identical to mine, but facing the wall. The next day, I asked the professor if anyone had ever lived here before us. He poured his tea without looking at me. "No one ever truly leaves," he said. "The house forgets them. Eventually, they forget themselves too." By now, my mother was slipping. She'd forget who I was sometimes, call me names I didn't recognize. One afternoon, she stared at me for a long time and whispered, "I already raised you. You were 12 when you vanished. I wasn't 12 yet." That evening, I stood outside the white door. It wasn't breathing this time. It was humming, like a generator under strain. I touched it, and time stopped. The air froze. The hallway lights flickered and locked in place, like strobes, and through the wall beside me I saw myself walking backward. His mouth moved, but no sound came. Then he looked at me and screamed silently before fading into the wall. That night I dreamed I was older, at least 16. Taller, my voice deeper. I was holding a knife. My mother was crying, and the professor was on the floor, unmoving, eyes open, glassy. The room bent around me, and the white door opened by itself. She came looking for him, but what if something followed her back? It was just past midnight on an October night when I first heard the dragging, not just footsteps, a limp, followed by an unnatural thump, then a pause, and then again. It was slow, intentional, as if someone didn't care about being heard. I was on the second floor of our modest home, a rental in a quiet cul-de-sac. My dog had perked up and whined. My body knew before my brain caught up. Someone was downstairs. Called out. No reply, so I crept toward the stairs, holding my breath. As I leaned over the railing and peeked down, there she was, a woman, frail, dressed in what looked like a hospital gown, was pacing the living room. She didn't acknowledge me. She just walked in slow circles, head tilted, mouth moving like she was whispering to someone who wasn't there. And every time her left foot hit the ground, the floor shook, a hard wooden thump. I didn't wait to find out who or what she was. I grabbed my dog by the collar and exited out the basement door. Barefoot, not even grabbing my phone. I circled the outside of the house, sticking to the shadows. Through the living room window, I could still see her. Still walking, still moaning, still thumping. It's worth noting, I've had strange things happen to me all my life, especially near Halloween. Weird noises, flickering lights, shadows in mirrors. But this was different. This felt like a memory that didn't belong to me, playing itself out in my house. Up the road, I noticed a young couple with flashlights, calling out into the night. The woman kept saying, "Nancy? Nancy, honey?" over and over. I approached them carefully. "Are you Jimmy?" I asked the man. He stopped, confused, cautious. "That was my dad's name," he replied, slowly. "He passed away in 2015. The woman added, "Nancy's his mom. She wandered off again." That's when I found out something that sent a chill through my spine. Nancy had once lived in my house. It used to be her home. And tonight, she had wandered back there. Looking for her husband. Looking for Jimmy. Nancy had advanced dementia. She remembered the house as it was 20 years ago. And yes, she had a wooden leg. We brought her back safely. She didn't fight, but she stared at me the whole time. Her eyes, wide and glassy. Before they turned to leave, she whispered to me, "You should get out of there, before he finds his way back too." I didn't ask what she meant. I locked everything that night. But I knew it wasn't over, and I was right. 3 days later, I woke to thumping again. This time, no one was in the house. The dog barked at the hallway mirror, and just for a second, in the glass, I saw Nancy, only it wasn't Nancy anymore. Her mouth was wide open, but her eyes were gone, and behind her stood something tall, shadowed, and smiling. The waterfall boy. Revisited. Year later, I thought the worst was behind me. I was wrong. One humid summer night, I went driving with a friend. We stopped, near a forest waterfall we used to visit often. Peaceful, remote, always empty at night. I had to pee, so I stepped into the woods, walking confidently. I knew the terrain, even in the dark. But this time, something felt off. It was darker than usual. Still. Too still. I found a spot near the cliff, close to the road, but hidden from passing cars. That's when I felt it again. The eyes, watching me. Burning through the trees, rooting me in place like a hunted animal. I finished as fast as I could, stumbling back toward the road. My friend was in the car waving at me. Then she froze. From across the street, a child ran toward where I had just been. He had no flashlight, no shoes, no sound, and no business being out here. He looked about 9 years old, wearing ragged shorts, no shirt, wild, tangled hair. He didn't walk, he glided. The road he crossed had a cliff on one side. I had just come from there. And yet, he came from above. No one could climb that fast, not in the dark. But he had. He stopped exactly where I'd stood, tilted his head, and looked up at me. I couldn't breathe. My friend hit the horn, and when I blinked, he was gone. Weeks later, I returned during, the day, same area, same path. I searched the spot where the boy had stood. There was a small carving in a tree, a heart, with the initials N+J below it, almost scratched in anger. Taken back. My stomach turned. Nancy, Jimmy, the boy hadn't followed me. He'd followed her. I started researching. Nancy's son, Jimmy Jr., had died at age 9. He drowned in that very waterfall. And after that, Nancy's mental health had declined rapidly. I don't think she ever accepted it. She kept waiting for him, calling him, bringing him home. Now I wonder, when she wandered into my house, did she bring him back with her? And if so, was the boy I saw really Jimmy, or just something wearing his face? She came looking for him, but what if something followed her back? It was just past midnight on an October night when I first heard the dragging. Not just footsteps, a limp, followed by an unnatural thump, then a pause, and then again. It was slow, intentional, as if someone didn't care about being heard. I was on the second floor of our modest home, a rental in a quiet cul-de-sac. My dog had perked up and whined. My body knew before my brain caught up. Someone was downstairs. Called out. No reply, so I crept toward the stairs, holding my breath. As I leaned over the railing and peeked down, there she was, a woman, frail, dressed in what looked like a hospital gown, was pacing the living room. She didn't acknowledge me. She just walked in slow circles, head tilted, mouth moving like she was whispering to someone who wasn't there. And every time her left foot hit the ground, the floor shook, a hard wooden thump. I didn't wait to find out who or what she was. I grabbed my dog by the collar and exited out the basement door, barefoot, not even grabbing my phone. I circled the outside of the house, sticking to the shadows. Through the living room window, I could still see her, still walking, still moaning, still thumping. It's worth noting, I've had strange things happen to me all my life, especially near Halloween. Weird noises, flickering lights, shadows in mirrors. But this was different. This felt like a memory that didn't belong to me, playing itself out in my house. Up the road, I noticed a young couple with flashlights, calling out into the night. The woman kept saying, "Nancy? Nancy, honey?" over and over. I approached them carefully. "Are you Jimmy?" I asked the man. He stopped, confused, cautious. "That was my dad's name," he replied, slowly. "He passed away in 2015. The woman added, "Nancy's his mom. She wandered off again." That's when I found out something that sent a chill through my spine. Nancy had once lived in my house. It used to be her home. And tonight, she had wandered back there. Looking for her husband. Looking for Jimmy. Nancy had advanced dementia. She remembered the house as it was 20 years ago. And yes, she had a wooden leg. We brought her back safely. She didn't fight, but she stared at me the whole time. Her eyes, wide and glassy. Before they turned to leave, she whispered to me, "You should get out of there, before he finds his way back too." I didn't ask what she meant. I locked everything that night. But I knew it wasn't over, and I was right. 3 days later, I woke to thumping again. This time, no one was in the house. The dog barked at the hallway mirror, and just for a second, in the glass, I saw Nancy, only it wasn't Nancy anymore. Her mouth was wide open, but her eyes were gone, and behind her stood something tall, shadowed, and smiling. The waterfall boy. Revisited. Year later, I thought the worst was behind me. I was wrong. One humid summer night, I went driving with a friend. We stopped near a forest waterfall we used to visit often. Peaceful, remote, always empty at night. I had to pee, so I stepped into the woods, walking confidently. I knew the terrain, even in the dark. But this time, something felt off. It was darker than usual. Still. Too still. I found a spot near the cliff, close to the road, but hidden from passing cars. That's when I felt it again. The eyes. Watching me. Burning through the trees, rooting me in place like a hunted animal. I finished as fast as I could, stumbling back toward the road. My friend was in the car waving at me. Then she froze. From across the street, a child ran toward where I had just been. He had no flashlight, no shoes, no sound, and no business being out here. He looked about 9 years old, wearing ragged shorts, no shirt, wild, tangled hair. He didn't walk, he glided. The road he crossed had a cliff on one side. I had just come from there. And yet, he came from above. No one could climb that fast, not in the dark. But he had. He stopped exactly where I'd stood, tilted his head, and looked up at me. I couldn't breathe. My friend hit the horn, and when I blinked, he was gone. Weeks later, I returned during, the day, same area, same path. I searched the spot where the boy had stood. There was a small carving in a tree, a heart, with the initials N+J below it, almost scratched in anger. Taken back. My stomach turned. Nancy, Jimmy, the boy hadn't followed me. He'd followed her. I started researching. Nancy's son, Jimmy Jr., had died at age 9. He drowned in that very waterfall. And after that, Nancy's mental health had declined rapidly. I don't think she ever accepted it. She kept waiting for him, calling him, bringing him home. Now I wonder, when she wandered into my house, did she bring him back with her? And if so, was the boy I saw really Jimmy, or just something wearing his face? A few years ago, I moved into an old house on the outskirts of Georgia. Isolated, surrounded by withered cornfields and dusty red dirt roads no one traveled anymore. This happened when I was living alone in a rural area, and I thought I'd eventually get used to the dead silence out here. The house dated back to the Civil War era. Its wooden walls creaked every time the wind passed through, and the old ladies in the neighborhood swore they'd seen flickering lights in the upstairs windows. Even though that part of the house had been abandoned for decades, I didn't believe in ghosts, just a 30-year-old bachelor trying to escape the noise of Atlanta. But something about the air here constantly made my skin crawl. One autumn night, when it was so cold my breath fogged up inside the bedroom, I was jolted awake by a loud thump from downstairs. It sounded like someone had dropped a bag of cement onto the wooden floor. My heart pounding, I grabbed the flashlight beside my bed. The clock read 3:00 a.m., the devil's hour, as my grandma used to call it. I told myself it was probably a stray cat sneaking in through the kitchen window. But then a long, slow scraping noise echoed through the house, like nails dragging across wood, followed by the sudden stench of mildew flooding the room. I stood frozen, listening. There was no wind, just the sound of deep, heavy breathing, coming from directly beneath the floorboards. Something was down there, and it knew I was awake. I couldn't stay in bed. That thump echoed in my mind like a challenge. I grabbed my flashlight and went downstairs to investigate. Each step creaked under the weight of fear. The beam of my flashlight swept across the pitch-black hallway, illuminating crooked family portraits on the walls. Pale faces I swore weren't there when I moved in. The air was icy, even though the fireplace was still glowing in the living room. At the foot of the stairs, I paused to listen. That's when I heard it, a short, raspy chuckle from the corner of the room. It sent a jolt down my spine. When I reached the bottom step, I heard an old woman's voice whispering, "Hello." Faint, trembling, as if coming from a broken speaker. I turned my head. My flashlight flicked toward the basement door, now slightly ajar. I was sure I had locked it before going to bed. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice cracking. "Only," my own echo replied. Then, from the narrow opening, a withered hand emerged, bony, wrinkled like burnt paper, with long black nails scratching against the wood. I stumbled backward, nearly falling, as the door creaked open wider to reveal a void of blackness beneath. The voice whispered again, "Hello." But this time, it came from right behind me, even though I was still facing the basement. The flashlight slipped from my trembling hand and rolled across the floor, its flickering light landing on a pair of bare, rotting feet, just inches from where I stood. I froze, staring at the decaying feet in the flickering beam. The voice returned, now warped and twisted, like someone laughing and sobbing at the same time. I spun around, but no one was behind me, only the basement door, slowly swinging shut, untouched. From the darkness, a figure staggered up the stairs, head bowed low, tangled silver hair covering her face, each step leaving a trail of black, oozing water on the wood. I screamed and bolted up the stairs, racing to the bedroom, but the door was locked from the inside, even though I'd left it open. Turns out, it was just my elderly neighbor with dementia who had wandered into my basement. At least, that's what I wanted to believe when I saw her standing there mumbling nonsense. But her eyes, they were completely white, no pupils, and the twisted smile on her lips didn't belong to someone still alive. I called her son, who lived nearby, to come pick her up, my voice shaking over the phone. When he arrived, he looked at me like I'd lost my mind. My mom died 3 years ago. I turned around. She was gone. just the stench of mold and a wet trail leading back down to the basement. That night I heard the thump again, but this time it came from the ceiling, and with it that same raspy laugh right above my bed. The next morning I found an old photograph in the basement. She was standing beside this very house, but behind her was me, even though I had never taken that picture. Now every night, I feel her sitting at the foot of my bed, whispering that I belong to this house forever. When I was 19, the summer before college, I convinced my sister Sarah, who's 5 years older than me, to explore a waterfall not far from where we lived. This happened when I was 19 and went with my older sister to visit a waterfall, and it was the first time I really stepped outside the tiny Oregon town we grew up in, where everyone knew each other by name. We lived in a small town, and the falls weren't far, just a few miles through a dense pine forest. The kind of place where old men at the local bar told stories about hikers who went missing and never came back. Sarah was excited, telling me to bring my camera to take artsy photos for Instagram. I just wanted to escape the suffocating heat in the house. We hiked down a moss-covered trail, the cool mist from the falls hitting our faces as we got closer. The sound of rushing water echoed in the distance, but something felt off, as if the sound itself was distorted, tangled with whispers too soft to understand. Sarah didn't notice, too busy playing with her phone, but I started to get goosebumps, like someone was watching us from the treetops. When we reached the base of the falls, the water was eerily still. No ripples, no spray, even though it poured constantly from above. I turned to say something to Sarah, then froze. Across the stream stood a small figure, perfectly still. A little boy in a torn white shirt, wet hair plastered to his face, staring straight at me without blinking. I had a weird feeling all day, like someone was watching me, as if dozens of unseen eyes followed every step I took through the woods. Sarah kept humming along to pop songs from the radio, carefree. But I began noticing strange details. The birds had gone silent, and branches on the path looked freshly broken, like someone, or something, had walked just ahead of us. When we got closer to the waterfall, I saw him again. The same boy in white, now standing right at the edge of the water, his bare feet covered in mud. I called out to Sarah, pointing toward him. "Do you see that?" She frowned and said, "There's no one there." I blinked. He was still there, head tilted, as if listening for something. I stepped into the stream, the icy water rising to my ankles, and the boy looked up. His eyes were hollow, black, like two bottomless pits. A sudden gust of wind swept through, carrying the sharp, sour smell of rotting moss. And then I heard it, a child's laughter, bubbling up from beneath the water. Sarah tugged on my sleeve, her voice trembling. "Did you hear that?" Before I could answer, the water beneath us rippled, expanding in circles though nothing had fallen in. The boy raised a hand, pointing directly at me, then slowly stepped backward into the thick mist that cloaked the waterfall. A chill crept down my spine. I wanted to leave. Immediately, I told Sarah we needed to go, but she insisted on staying, mumbling about how the lighting's perfect for artsy shots. I turned back to look at the boy. He was gone, as if he'd never been there, just a wall of drifting mist across the stream. Sarah kept snapping photos, unaware that the surface of the water was starting to foam, like something huge was stirring below. I grabbed her arm, nearly yelling, "Let's go, Sarah!" This time she listened. But as we walked back onto the trail, we heard it. Heavy footsteps behind us, not ours. We ran the whole way back to the car, breathless. Once inside, I locked the doors instantly. Driving home, I couldn't shake the feeling we were being followed. I kept checking the rear view mirror, expecting to see a flash of white. His shirt, his face. Sarah was silent the entire ride, pale, clutching her camera tightly. That night, when we looked through the photos, I saw one Sarah had taken while I wasn't paying attention, me, standing at the waterfall. And behind me was the boy. Closer than I remembered, still pointing at me, his mouth wide open as if screaming. But what terrified me most wasn't the picture. Later that night, in the dim mirror of my bathroom, I saw a small shape behind me, whispering my name in a wet, rasping voice. The next morning, Sarah called me, panic in her voice. "Did you check the camera? It's empty." But I swear I heard the sound of rushing water in my room last night. Three years ago, when I had just turned 25, my life in the suburbs of Denver, Colorado, mostly revolved around a part-time job at a coffee shop and quiet evenings with Netflix. This happened when I was 25, and I met a guy online named Jazz, a name that caught my eye after swiping through dozens of bland dating profiles. I'd been single for a while and was excited to meet someone new. So when Jazz messaged me with a confident, slightly mysterious tone, I was immediately intrigued. He said he was a freelancer, loved old-school jazz. Fitting, right? And his profile photo had a crooked little smile that made my heart skip. We hit it off fast. Texting every day. He was sweet, funny, charismatic. Our messages stretched into the early hours, covering everything from movies to secrets I'd never told anyone before. Before long, I found myself looking forward to his texts like they were part of my daily routine. Jazz made me laugh, but sometimes his questions were oddly specific. Where are you? Who are you with? What are you doing? I brushed it off as endearing curiosity. After a few weeks, he asked me out. I said yes. I remember standing in front of my mirror for over an hour, trying on outfits, finally settling on my favorite blue dress. I felt like a teenager again, nervous and giddy. We met at a small riverside bar. The lights were dim, casting a soft glow across Jazz's angular face. His eyes lit up when he looked at me, but there was something cold in that gaze, something I couldn't quite explain. He told me about growing up in a ghost town, his voice low and steady like he was reciting something he'd memorized. When I asked more, he chuckled and changed the subject. That night, something clung to me, an uneasy feeling. My apartment looked normal, windows locked, kitchen light off, but I swear I heard soft footsteps on the hardwood floor, and I live alone. Checked my phone. Jazz had messaged me. "You looked beautiful tonight, sleep well." Normally I would have smiled, but my hands trembled, because through the gap in my curtains, a tall, thin silhouette was standing under the streetlight staring up at my window. I shut the curtains, told myself it was a trick of the light, But all night, I heard tapping on the glass. Gentle, rhythmic. The first few weeks with Jazz felt like a dream. He took me to fancy places, brought me flowers for no reason. I started to think I'd finally found someone good. Things were great at first, but then he started getting possessive. It happened so fast I barely noticed. He'd grab my phone when I wasn't looking, ask detailed questions about my day, demand selfies whenever I left the house to prove where I was. He got angry if I didn't text back immediately. His voice over the phone grew cold, sharp, like I'd betrayed him just by making lattes for customers. I tried to convince myself it was just intense affection. But then one night, it went too far. It was nearly midnight. I was watching TV when the doorbell rang. Jazz showed up uninvited, eyes red, hand clenched around a broken beer bottle. When I asked what he was doing there, he growled, "Who the hell do you think you are questioning me?" I slammed the door shut, heart racing, but he didn't leave. I heard him pacing outside on the porch, muttering to himself in a low voice that didn't even sound human. I started feeling trapped, like every moment with him was a rope tightening around my throat. That night, after he finally left, I locked every door and window, but I couldn't sleep. Instead, I heard scratching, faint, claw-like, moving along the walls, from the living room to my bedroom. I turned on every light, checked the entire house. Nothing, until I looked in the bathroom mirror. Behind my reflection, a smudge, a blurred face that looked like Jazz's, but twisted. Eyes stretched unnaturally wide, staring at me. I screamed, ran out of the room. The next morning, I found a note slipped under my front door. "You can't run." The handwriting was shaky, not like Jazz's usual neat penmanship, and the paper was stained with something that looked like dried black ink, or blood. I'd had enough. I texted Jazz. It was over. I wanted nothing more to do with him, but he wouldn't. "Stop," my phone blew up with texts. "You can't leave me. You belong to me." He sent photos of me at the coffee shop, at the grocery store, inside my apartment. I blocked his number, but every night I still heard the knocking. And once, when I looked through the peephole, I saw his red eyes staring back at me, even though the hallway was empty when I opened the door. Then came the worst night. I woke from a nightmare, sweating, shaking, and he was there, standing in my room, Jazz tall, still, eyes glowing in the dark, like camera flashes. I screamed, turned on the light. He was gone, but the smell of his cigarettes lingered in the air. I called the cops. Got a restraining order. It didn't help. He kept showing up. Not in person anymore, but through other signs. Muddy handprints on the windows. A raspy laugh echoing from downstairs. Once I woke up to find my kitchen knife lying on the pillow next to me. I left Denver, moved to a small town in Wyoming. Changed my number, deleted every online account. I thought I was free. But then, on my first night in the new house, I found a CD in the mailbox. Old Jazz. No label. No note. When I played it, amidst the saxophone, Jazz's voice, whispering, "You think you can hide?" I threw the disc away, but every night since I hear that music again. playing softly from somewhere in the house, even though there are no speakers, no radios, and lately, in selfies I take, just for fun, there's someone behind me, a man with a crooked smile. Last night, the bathroom mirror had a message scratched into the glass, with fingernails. Jazz is always here. I live in an old, creaky house on the edge of town, the same house where my mother passed away 9 years ago. There's nothing particularly special about the place, except for the strange sounds it makes at night. The wind whistling through, unseen cracks, the soft creak of aging wood, and sometimes a faint piano melody drifting down from the attic, as if someone up there was playing a sorrowful tune from beyond the grave. I've always been a skeptic. The kind of person who laughs off ghost stories my sisters used to whisper late at night. But lately, I've begun to wonder if I'm sharing this house with something that doesn't belong to this world. It all started on a rainy night. I was lying in bed scrolling through Reddit threads about astral projection meditation, a ridiculous thing some online friends swore was totally real. Then suddenly, ding, a sharp metallic note echoed from the attic, like someone had slammed a key on the old piano up there. I bolted upright, heart pounding. It's just the wind, I told myself, but deep down I knew no wind could make a sound that precise. I grabbed my flashlight and headed toward the attic, determined to put an end to whatever prank this was, probably just a mouse, or maybe a stray cat. Each step on the attic stairs creaked under my weight, as if mocking my half-hearted courage. I pushed open the heavy wooden door, and a gust of freezing air hit my face, like the attic had exhaled its breath after years of silence. I swept the flashlight across the dusty room. I followed the sound to a large garbage bag filled with old childhood toys. I reached in and pulled out a cheap Chinese toy piano I hadn't seen in over a decade. I pressed a few keys. Nothing. Flipping it over, I opened the battery compartment. Empty. No batteries. Then what made that sound? I pictured a cold, invisible hand pressing a key in the dark, and a chill ran down my spine. I forced a laugh to shake the fear, but even that echoed, strangely like the attic was laughing back, low and mocking. I brought the piano downstairs, determined to figure it out. In the kitchen, I dug out 2 AA batteries, popped them in, and hit a key. Nothing. The toy was dead. Probably had been since I stuffed it in that bag 15 years ago. But then, as I set it down on the table and sat on the couch, pling one. Single note rang out, clear and crisp, without anyone touching it. I jumped, knocking my coffee to the floor. No, 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 I whispered, stepping back. Not so funny now, was it? The guy who mocked every cheap horror movie, now trembling at a child's toy. Then, without warning, the piano began to play. Wild, frenzied notes forming a chaotic, haunting tune. It sounded like it was pleading, begging not to be destroyed. I grabbed a hammer from the toolbox, ready to smash the damned thing. But my arm froze mid-air. The music stopped, and in the sudden silence, I heard a whisper, a raspy voice, genderless, emerging from the piano itself. "Don't leave me," I screamed, dropped the hammer, and bolted from the room. But when I returned, the piano was gone. I tried to forget, told myself it was sleep deprivation. or too much coffee. But every night, when I turned off the lights, I heard the piano again. Louder this time. Clearer. Not just notes, but a symphony of sorrow echoing down from the attic. I started sleeping with the lights on. It didn't help. One evening while doing dishes, I turned, and there it was. Sitting right there on the kitchen counter, the toy piano. I swore I had thrown it out 2 days ago. I dropped the plate, shattering it. "What do you want from me?" I shouted. Only a giggle answered, childlike, but cold and utterly soulless. I called my sister Mia the next night. She's the kind of person who believes in ghosts, demons, and whatever else most people laugh at. She arrived carrying a bag of salt, crucifixes, and some ancient spell book she claimed to have bought from a black market stall. "You're kidding me," I said, trying to keep a straight face. She just stared. "If you didn't believe it, why'd you call me?" She started sprinkling salt through the house, murmuring prayers I couldn't understand. When we climbed to the attic, a sudden wind gusted through, despite every window being shut, and there it was again. The piano, sitting in the center of the floor, its keys rising and falling on their own, playing another manic, twisted tune. Mia screamed, dropping her cross. I stood frozen, unable to believe my eyes. "It's possessed," she yelled. "Burn it!" I grabbed a lighter, flicked it on, and held it to the piano. That's when a tiny, pale hand emerged from inside the toy, grabbing my wrist. I yanked away, icy cold surging from my fingers to my shoulder. The hand vanished, but the piano began to shake violently, screaming like a child in pain. Mia dragged me down the stairs, but the moment we reached the living room, every door and window in the house slammed shut. We were locked in. The music no longer came from the attic. It echoed through the walls. We huddled together on the sofa, Mia clutching her spell book and me gripping a dead flashlight like it could protect me. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. I nodded. There were footsteps now, slow, heavy, like a child dragging their feet across the wooden floor. Closer, closer. I laughed weakly. Maybe this ghost just wants to apologize for scaring me, huh? My laugh died as the living room door creaked open, and there it was. A small, hazy figure stood in the doorway, holding the toy piano. Its eyes, or rather, its hollow sockets, stared straight into mine. "Who are you?" I shouted, my voice cracking. The figure tilted its head, and the piano in its hands played a single note, ding, before it stepped forward. Each step made the floor groan as if the house might collapse. Mia threw her book at it. It passed right through. Then it stopped. From its mouth came a warped, broken voice. "You forgot me, but I never forgot you." I froze. That voice. It was eerily familiar. That night felt eternal. Mia fainted from fear, and I sat there, staring at the figure, trying to remember. Trying to understand what I had done to deserve this. And then I remembered. That toy piano wasn't just some forgotten junk. It was a birthday gift from my mother, given to me the year I turned 5, just days before she died in a car crash. The same crash I nearly didn't survive. I had buried it, stuffed it into the attic like I had stuffed away every memory of her, but now she was back, not to haunt me, but to remind me. When the sun rose, the figure was gone. The piano remained, motionless on the floor. I picked it up. Tears streamed down my face. I pressed one final key. Ding. From the attic above, I heard my mother's laugh, gentle, warm, but tinged with sorrow. I know now, I'll never sleep peacefully again. During the summer of my sophomore year in college, my roommate Mike and I decided to stay at our apartment near campus in Ohio instead of going home. This happened over summer break, when the building was nearly empty, just the two of us left, behind in our creaky old 3-story complex, with long, echoing hallways and peeling paint that smelled like dust and age year-round. Most of the tenants had already left, so it was eerily quiet, the silence only broken by the occasional groan of the aging AC unit rattling in the living room. Mike wanted to stay to keep working at the pizza place down the street. Me? I just didn't want to deal with the suffocating atmosphere of home after finals. Our apartment was on the second floor, sandwiched between two units, 2A and 2C, that had been vacant since the beginning of summer. At first, I liked the quiet, but after a few days it began to feel heavy, like the building was holding its breath. One night I was scrolling through TikTok on the couch when I heard faint footsteps coming from the direction of 2C, slow, deliberate steps, pacing back and forth. I called out to Mike in the kitchen asking if he heard anything. He just laughed and said I was sleep deprived. But when I muted the music, the sound became clearer, paired with a long, dragging screech, like fingernails scraping the wall we shared with 2C. I froze, staring at the hallway door, and noticed that the light out there was flickering, even though I'd just replaced the bulb the night before. A few nights later, we were watching an episode of Stranger Things when the quiet shattered. Bang! A loud crash came from 2C. It sounded like a heavy dresser being slammed onto the floor. Mike and I jumped. He muted the TV, and we sat in tense silence. At least, it's just old pipes or something settling, he offered. But the noises didn't stop. They changed. Soft dragging sounds across hardwood, punctuated by a low groaning that definitely wasn't plumbing. Mike grabbed his baseball bat and said, "Probably drunk students screwing around. I'll check it out." I followed him reluctantly into the hallway. The light outside had gone out completely, despite being on just an hour ago. We stood outside the door of 2C. The dragging stopped. Then came knocking, slow, rhythmic, like someone gently rapping their knuckles against the inside wall. Mike raised his hand to knock back, but I grabbed his arm, because through the narrow gap beneath the door, I saw a faint, wavering light, like a flashlight moving around inside. That apartment had no power. We backed away and returned to our unit, but the knocking followed, this time coming from the wall behind our couch. It was getting closer. We didn't sleep that night. The sounds grew louder as the sky lightened, more banging, heavy and relentless, like someone pounding the shared wall with a hammer. We sat together on the couch, every light in the apartment on, but the brightness didn't make the cold any less real. Just before dawn, the noises stopped, replaced by a sharp metallic screech. The stench of rust filled the air. I looked out the window and saw the hallway light flickering again. Faster this time. Morse code fast. Maybe SOS. We called the landlord that morning. He sounded annoyed. Told us flatly that no one had access to 2C. It had been locked since early in the year. No keys, no entry. Mike didn't believe him. He insisted we check it ourselves. So we returned to the hallway. The doorknob was coated in dust, the lock untouched. We never figured out what we heard that summer. We moved out not long after. Before leaving, I took a few photos of the apartment, mostly for memories. But when we reviewed the shots later that night, we noticed something in one of them. In the window of 2C, a tall, faint silhouette, standing in the shadows. Its head tilted unnaturally. In its hand, what looked like a hammer. Mike swore he hadn't seen anyone there when he took the photo. Later, while vacuuming the living room one last time, we found something stuck under the rug. A piece of paper, crumpled, faded, with just 4 words. Don't come back. Since then I've moved twice, but every so often I still hear knocking in my new place. Faint, patient, and when the lights begin to flicker, that metallic rust smell always follows. On a sweltering summer evening, I, a 14-year-old wannabe guitarist, was jamming with 2 of my bandmates in my garage. None of us could really play. We were just a bunch of kids with delusions of becoming rock stars, more Bill and Ted than actual musicians. The night was pitch black, no moon, no stars, just the endless chirping of crickets outside. Somehow, our conversation drifted from music to witches, and eventually landed on the Ouija board. I suggested making one ourselves, after a goth girl on my school bus said DIY boards were way more powerful. I ripped a piece of cardboard from the trash and scribbled the alphabet, numbers, a sun and a moon onto it with a half-dead pen. The planchette was cut from thicker board, bent and jagged like a broken fingernail. We all sat in a circle around the rusted table, our trembling fingers resting on the makeshift planchette. The air felt heavy, reeking of motor oil and sweat. It made me want to gag. We asked dumb questions like, "Is anyone there?" And the planchette began to move. But the letters made no sense. Just gibberish and random numbers. I was about to give up, thinking we were wasting our night in this messy garage. Then, out of frustration, I shouted, "How are we supposed to understand this?" Without hesitation, the planchette darted to the moon, then to the sun, then slowly, spelled out DDESREV Iridi, spun 3 times counterclockwise, then slid over to goodbye. We all froze. My bassist friend's jaw dropped. "Dude, it just spelled reversed," he stammered. I scoffed, assuming one of them was screwing with us. But they all swore they hadn't moved it. Feeling shaken, I stepped outside to get some air. The night breeze carried the damp scent of rotting leaves from behind the garage. We decided to compare our homemade board with a real one. We biked down to this crusty old convenience store, the kind with dim yellow lights and dusty shelves. Sure enough, the sun and moon on my board were flipped. A stupid mistake, but something about it sent a chill through me. On the way back, the keyboard guy quietly said he heard whispering from the garage as we left, like someone was muttering the word goodbye in reverse. That night, I burned the board in the fireplace. Ashes floated, Into the living room. My mom yelled at me for making a mess, but I didn't explain. I couldn't. Since then, I avoid the garage. Every time I walk past it, I feel like something is standing behind that warped wooden door, watching me. None of us ever spoke of that night again. It's like we all silently agreed to forget. But I know deep down, that board didn't really burn. It's still out there, waiting. It was a sweltering summer night in 2011 in Melbourne. The humidity clung to my skin, my sweat soaking through an old stretched-out t-shirt. I was 19, a thrill-seeking idiot, and I'd convinced my 3 closest friends, Jack, Milo, and Sean, to explore Larendel, the infamous abandoned psychiatric hospital said to be haunted. I'd heard stories, weird noises, shadows, cold spots, and that stupid idea came to life while we were bored, sitting in my car, drinking expired beer we'd picked up from a sketchy corner store. Jack, the joker of the group, said that if we saw a ghost, he'd offer it a beer and try to befriend it. Larundel rose from the darkness like a monstrous corpse. The gray brick walls were stained and crumbling, windows boarded up with rotting planks, and a few shards of broken glass dangled like jagged teeth. We parked near one of the buildings, where a flimsy metal fence half-heartedly tried to keep people out. Milo, the biggest of us, lifted a loose panel and we slipped inside, hearts pounding with the mix of fear and excitement that only trespassing can bring. The night was unnervingly silent. No birds, no wind, just the crunch of our footsteps on dry grass, echoing like snapping bones. We found an entrance, a sagging wooden door that groaned as Sean pushed it open. The stench hit me instantly, rotting wood, damp earth, and something faintly metallic, like old blood. Inside, it was pitch black. The air was thick with mildew and peeling paint, and something else, sharp, coppery, rotten. We switched on our phone flashlights. The beams lit up graffiti-scrawled walls, distorted faces screaming silently, and in dripping red paint, someone had written, "Do not go upstairs." We crept through a small room that opened into the main corridor. A staircase loomed ahead, twisted and tilted, leading upward. Jack whispered, "I heard a patient hang themselves here, right on those stairs." I scoffed, told him he was full of it, but my throat was dry, and my hand holding the phone had started to shake. Then, only 15 seconds later, we heard it. Footsteps, crunching gravel, outside the door, slow at first, then picking up speed. We killed the lights instantly, instinctively pressed close to one another, holding our breath. The footsteps stopped, right behind us, less than a meter away. We thought it might be a guard, and waited to be caught. But there was no flashlight, no voice, just a sudden wave of freezing cold air like someone had opened a walk-in freezer next to us. Sean turned around slowly and whispered, "There's no one there." That's when Milo screamed, "Run!" We bolted, tripping over each other, shoving, desperate to get out. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. We made it to the car, flung ourselves inside, and as we pulled away, I looked back. Under the dim streetlight stood a tall, thin figure in a tattered white gown, head tilted to one side like it was studying us. The car rolled forward, but Jack swore it had no feet, just floated above the ground. And its arms were too long, reaching out like it was trying to touch the car. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept hearing gravel crunching. Closer. Closer. Like something had followed me home. The next day I did some research on Larendel. Turns out it once held some of the most dangerous patients in the state, and in 1970, a nurse went missing inside. Completely vanished. Rumor has it she still roams the halls, hunting trespassers to drag down to the basement. No one's ever come back from that basement. We never went back to Larendel. But every time I drive past that road, I catch a glimpse of white in the corner of my eye, a flicker of movement just beyond the trees. And I know, it never left. Every night when I close my eyes, I see that figure again, standing at the foot of my bed, whispering words I can't understand. But the voice is so cold, it makes my bones ache. I've never told anyone this story, because every time I remember it, a cold chill runs down my spine, like someone is standing right behind me. Since I was a kid, I've seen them. The black figures, not shadows, not hallucinations, but full, solid shapes, tall, faceless, eyeless. Just a mass of pure, impenetrable darkness. Like a void carved into the world. The first time was when I was 5. I was sitting in the living room, playing with some toy blocks. My mom was in the kitchen, making sandwiches, the smell of fresh bread filling the house. I looked up and there it was, a tall, thin figure standing in the corner right next to my dad's old recliner. It didn't move. It didn't make a sound. It just stood there, as if watching me. I screamed and ran to the kitchen, clinging to my mother's leg, but when she brought me back, it was gone. She said I imagined it, but I didn't. It was too real, too cold, and that feeling of being watched, it never left. The second time was when I was 12, late at night in my bedroom. I was up studying, a dim desk lamp casting long shadows across my books. The window was wide open, and the curtains flapped violently in the wind. I heard a branch snap outside, but didn't dare look. That same eerie sensation I'd felt when I was 5 crept back in. Then I felt it before I saw it, a sudden drop in temperature, like someone had opened a freezer right behind me. I turned around, and there it was again. The black figure. This time, tall enough to almost touch the ceiling, standing right beside my bed. Its arms, if they were arms, were long, unnaturally so, reaching out as if to touch me. I screamed, threw a book at it, but the book passed straight through, hitting the wall behind. The figure vanished. I sat there shaking, soaked in cold sweat. I never told anyone. I was afraid they'd think I'd lost my mind. After that, it became more unpredictable. When I was 16, I saw it under the old oak tree on the corner while walking home from basketball practice. When I was 20, I saw it again, this time in the rearview mirror, sitting in the back seat of my car as I drove down the highway at night. No face, no eyes, just that silent black mass. Every time I felt the same thing, that icy chill, and the sense that I wasn't just being watched, I was being hunted. Now I'm 25, and I still see it. Just last week I was washing dishes in my new apartment. I glanced out the kitchen window, and there it was, standing in the parking lot, between two trucks, only a few feet away. I yanked the blinds shut, heart racing, but I knew it was still there, waiting. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it wants, but I have this horrible feeling that one day, it won't just be watching anymore. And when that day comes, I don't know if I'll be able to stop it. I never believed in ghosts, not until that night on Ramirez Hollow. A narrow trail winding through a dense forest on the outskirts of town, Ramirez Hollow had a reputation. Stories of strange disappearances, whispered warnings passed around like urban legends. I always thought it was just that, stories. That night was a crisp autumn evening. Leaves rustled underfoot, golden and brittle under the pale moonlight. I was 21, a college student and amateur photographer, out with my friends from the campus photography club. We'd chosen Ramirez Hollow for some night shots, hoping to capture eerie atmospheric moments in the stillness of the woods. We left the trailhead around 10 p.m., piling into my car, tired but satisfied with the photos we'd taken. I drove, while the others, Emma, Liam, and Tara, chatted and laughed in the backseat, scrolling through their cameras. The road out of Ramirez Hollow was pitch black. My headlights barely cut through the fog ahead. Trees lined both sides, their tangled branches clawing at the air like bony fingers. And yet, something shifted. The air in the car grew heavier, colder. No one said anything, but I could feel it. A breath, cold and damp, brushing the back of my neck. Then Tara screamed, "Stop the car!" I slammed the brakes, tires skidding, over damp leaves. My heart thundered in my chest. She pointed straight ahead, and I saw her. A woman, standing in the middle of the road. She wore a tattered white dress, soaked and hanging from her thin frame. Her long black hair covered her face, bare feet caked in mud. She didn't move, but I swear, I heard her. A whisper, a low, raspy voice, humming an old nursery rhyme. I honked, expecting her to step aside. She didn't flinch. Then Liam, the bravest among us, opened the door and stepped out. "Hey," he called. "Are you okay?" He took a few steps forward. That's when she lifted her head. She had no eyes, just two deep hollow sockets, and her mouth. It stretched in a grotesque grin far too wide, splitting almost to her ears. Liam screamed. He turned and bolted back to the car, face pale, eyes wide with pure terror. I floored it. The tires spun on wet ground, then caught, and we lurched forward. But she was gone, just like that. Vanished, as if she'd never been there. We never went back to Ramirez Hollow, but I haven't stopped seeing her. Every time I drive down a dark road, I check my rearview mirror. half expecting to see that eyeless face staring back at me from the back seat. And sometimes, in the dead of night, I hear her song again, that old lullaby, soft and broken, carried on the wind as if she's still out there, looking for me. I grew up in a small town surrounded by endless forests, where sunlight rarely pierced through the dense canopy above. My house sat at the edge of the woods, just a few steps away from narrow trails that disappeared into the dark. When I was little, the grown-ups in town told stories, chilling tales about people who walked into the forest and never came back, about whispers echoing between the trees at night. I never believed any of it. Not until the night I'll never forget. Was 15, walking home from school. It was already dark. I decided to take the shortcut through the woods, even though my mom had always warned me, never take that path after sunset. That night, the air was biting cold. My breath came out in pale clouds under the weak glow of my flashlight. The sound of insects buzzing blended with the crunch of dry leaves under my feet. But something felt off, heavy, like I was being watched. I quickened my pace, keeping my eyes forward, refusing to look into the darkness on either side. But then I heard it. A snap. A branch breaking. Not under my feet, but behind me. I stopped. Heart pounding. I turned around. Nothing. Just the trees, swaying gently in the wind. I told myself I was imagining things. But the moment I turned to walk, again I heard another snap, closer this time, like footsteps, like someone was following me. "Who's there?" I shouted. No reply. But the air around me suddenly felt wrong. Colder. Like the very air had frozen. My flashlight shook in my hand as I scanned the trees. And that's when I saw it. A figure, tall, unmoving, standing in the middle of the trail. About 20 meters ahead, it had no face, no eyes, just a solid mass of blackness. But somehow I felt it watching me, as if its gaze could pierce through skin and bone. I turned and ran. I didn't look back. My foot caught on a root and I fell hard. My flashlight flew from my hand, spinning across the forest floor. Its light swept across the twisted branches, making them look like clawed hands reaching for me. I scrambled up, heart racing, breath ragged, and kept running. When I finally burst out of the woods and into my yard, I slammed the door shut and locked it behind me. Gasping, I looked out the window. It was still there, standing at the edge of the forest, silent, motionless, waiting. I never went back into the woods after that night, but I've never truly left it behind. Every time I hear a branch snap, whether deep in the forest or just in my backyard, I feel that same icy chill, like it's still out there, still waiting. And sometimes, on the quietest nights, I hear footsteps, slow, heavy, coming down the trail, step by step, getting closer, looking for me. I never thought I'd touch a Ouija board again. Not after what happened the first time years ago. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. I was 17, spending a bitter winter evening at my best friend Lily's house. It was just the two of us and her older brother Ben. Their house sat on the edge of town, surrounded by open fields, and that night the wind howled through the cracks in the windows, sounding like something was crying out in the dark. Lily had found an old Ouija board in the basement. We laid it out on the dining table, lit a single candle, and watched as its flickering light cast warped shadows on the walls. The room was freezing, even though the fireplace was crackling nearby. We placed our fingers on the planchette. I asked, "Is anyone there?" The planchette moved slowly. It began to spell. Marya. Chill ran down my spine. Lily giggled, thinking Ben was messing with us. But Ben's expression said otherwise. He swore he wasn't doing anything, and I believed him. His eyes weren't playful. They were scared. I asked, "Mary, who are you?" The planchette moved faster now. CHET. We looked at each other, confused. "Die," Lily murmured. Then her eyes widened. "Wait, does it mean die? Like dead?" Before we could say anything else, the planchette began spinning wildly, out of control, without direction, like something invisible had taken over. Then the candle went out. There was no wind, no open windows, just sudden, suffocating darkness. Then came the knocks. 3 slow, deliberate knocks from the window. Outside was pitch black, but I swear I saw a figure. Faint. Still. Watching us through the fogged glass. Ben jumped up. "Stop it! Stop!" he shouted, running to the window and flinging the curtain open. There was nothing there. But the knocking stopped, and the cold in the room only grew heavier, thicker, like someone had opened a walk-in freezer right behind us. We tried to end the session, guiding the planchette to goodbye. It refused. Instead, it kept moving, spelling. Tim. Lily gasped. Tim was her dog. He died 2 years ago. She started crying. "I don't want to do this anymore," she whispered. That night when I got home, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard it again. 3 knocks, slow, rhythmic, like Mary was still trying to reach me. The next morning, Lily called me, her voice trembling. She said she'd found an old photo buried in a box in the basement. A woman named Mary, a previous tenant. She'd committed suicide. In the same room we used the Ouija board. I've never touched one since. But sometimes, late at night when the house is quiet, I hear knocking 3 times. Always 3. And I feel that same freezing air creep down my neck, like Mary is still out there, still trying to speak to me. Last spring, I stayed at my family's old house just outside Atlanta, Georgia. My parents were away on vacation in Florida, and I figured I'd keep the house company for a few weeks. It was a quiet Saturday night. I had just finished watching a horror movie on HBO and decided to go to bed early. The house is a 2-story place over 50 years old, with creaky floors that usually groan when strong wind blows through the oaks in the yard. But that night, there was no wind, no noise, just dead silence. I was rinsing a cup in the kitchen when I heard footsteps upstairs. Slow, steady, deliberate, as if someone was walking back and forth directly above me. At first, I told myself it was just the house settling after a warm day, so I turned on music on my phone to drown it out, but the steps kept going. Heavy boot-like thuds on old wooden floorboards. I turned off the music. I stood still under the ceiling, heart thumping, staring up. The footsteps were moving, from the master bedroom to the top of the stairs. Then they stopped, right above the entryway to the living room, where I usually leave the window slightly cracked. And then, I heard it. A soft exhale, as if someone was breathing, right above me. That was it. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed a baseball bat from the closet and crept upstairs. Each step moaned under my feet. But when I reached the top, nothing. The hallway was empty. The bedroom light was still on, just like I left it. Everything was exactly where it should be. I checked every room, closets, corners, even under the beds. No one. Nothing. Not even a sound. I told myself it was just post-movie paranoia. But when I turned back toward the stairs, the footsteps started again, this time from downstairs. It was like someone had switched places with me, walking now through the living room, closer to the kitchen. I stood frozen at the top of the staircase, clutching the bat, staring into the darkness below. The steps were slower now, heavier, accompanied by a dragging noise like something being pulled across the wooden floor. I turned on the stairway light, but the shadows seemed to swallow the light whole. And in the corner of my eye, I saw a tall, thin silhouette drift past the living room window. Even though the front door was locked, even though the curtains had never been opened. The breathing was louder now, deep, ragged, coming from just beneath me. I ran, bolted down the stairs, heart pounding, bat in hand. I checked every door, every lock. Everything was secure. Nothing was broken. Nothing was open. I called my friend Jake, my voice shaking, begged him to come over. The footsteps didn't stop until he arrived. They echoed through the house, near then far, like something playing a game with me. When Jake showed up, silence. Dead silence. But I couldn't sleep. I sat, curled on the couch until morning, staring at the stairs. Jake and I checked every room again. Still nothing. I thought maybe it was an animal. A raccoon, maybe. But there were no signs. No droppings. No scratches. No sounds. Just absence. I moved out a month later, but it didn't help, because the sounds followed me. In my new apartment, I heard them again, late at night. Footsteps, soft at first, then dragging, even though no one else could hear them. I even checked the attic. Nothing. But it knew. It knew I was afraid. Even now, I still don't feel safe. Because I know it's waiting. Recently, I looked in the bathroom mirror, and behind me, there it was, a shape in the hallway, Too thin, too still, too wrong. I turned. Round nothing, but I saw the breath mark on the glass. It's still out there, somewhere close, waiting. Three years ago, I went camping with three of my friends, Jake, Sarah, and Mike, in Chattahoochee National Forest, Georgia, a vast area with winding trails through dense pine forests, far from any city lights. This happened when I was camping, with friends in the woods on a late April night, when an unusually cold air covered the forest, and thick fog drifted through the treetops like pale smoke. We chose a clearing near a small stream, where the sound of running water blended with the soft wind through the pine leaves, creating a peaceful natural symphony. After setting up our tents, we lit a big campfire, roasted marshmallows, drank beer, and told ghost stories that Jake swore he had heard from his grandfather, stories about lost souls in the deep woods. I always loved the sense of freedom when camping. But that night, the silence of the forest seemed to carry a strange weight, as if someone was hiding in the darkness, watching us from afar. After the fire died down, leaving only dim embers, we all crawled into our tents to sleep. I lay in my sleeping bag, listening to Mike's steady breathing beside me, trying to fall asleep in the cold that seeped through the fabric walls. But then around midnight, I was startled awake by an unusual sound. Not the stream or the wind, but a vague, distant melody. Late at night I heard singing coming from the trees, a soft, sorrowful voice like an old lullaby, echoing through the dark canopy. At first I thought it was a joke, thought it was one of my friends messing with me. Maybe Jake had snuck out to scare me after all his scary stories. So I sat up, quietly unzipped the tent and peeked out. But the moonlight only lit up still tents, not a soul moving. But they were all asleep in their tents, their silhouettes unmoving in the sleeping bags. Steady breathing heard through the thin fabric, no sign of anyone sneaking out. I turned on my flashlight, sweeping the beam across the camp, but saw nothing but tall, silent pine trunks in the fog. The singing kept going soft and eerie, now clearer, as if someone was standing somewhere in the forest, a high female voice, but cold, piercing through the still air, making my heart race and the back of my neck numb in the chill of the deep night woods. I couldn't stay still anymore. That voice felt like an invisible thread pulling me out of the tent. I put on my shoes, grabbed the flashlight and stepped outside, legs trembling on the damp ground covered in fallen pine needles. I got up to check, but couldn't find where it was coming from. The flashlight's beam passing through massive trees, but only darkness and thick fog swirled like living smoke. The singing still echoed, sometimes near, sometimes far, leading me deeper into the woods, away from the campsite. It was like it was all around me, surrounding me in a circle of strange sound, no beginning or end, as if dozens of voices blended together, whispering through the leaves. I walked about 100 meters before stopping, heart pounding in my chest, when the singing dropped lower, merging with the faint rustling wind through the forest. I turned back to look toward the tents, but the fog had hidden the faint light from the embers, and I realized I could no longer hear the stream, only the singing, now closer, as if someone stood right behind me. I turned, swept the flashlight everywhere, and briefly saw a slender figure gliding between two trees, long hair floating in the wind though the air was still. I screamed, called Jake's name, but my voice was swallowed by the forest, and that figure vanished into the darkness. I ran back to the camp, tripping on roots, flashlight falling, its beam flickering across branches that looked like bony hands, reaching out. When I made it back into the tent, the singing still hadn't stopped, now accompanied by a hoarse whisper, "Come here, stay." I woke everyone up, panicked, telling them everything, but they just looked sleepily at me, telling me to calm down. Finally it stopped when the sun came up, the voice fading with the fog as dawn broke, leaving the forest in its usual silence. Told my friends the next day, but they didn't hear it. They laughed, said I was just spooked by Jake's stories. But Sarah's eyes showed a flicker of doubt when she looked toward the woods. A few weeks later, after we returned to Atlanta, I looked into the forest online and found out later a woman had gone missing in those woods years ago. A folk singer named Abigail Hart, who vanished on a foggy night 2 decades back, leaving behind only rumors of her ghostly voice echoing through the Chattahoochee woods. Jake called it coincidence, but I know what I heard wasn't imagination. It was too real, too vivid, like a call from the heart of the forest. That memory has never left me, like a persistent shadow following every step I take. Still don't know what I heard, but it wasn't normal. Though I've tried to convince myself it was just lack of sleep or fear from Jake's ghost stories. But that voice was too real, too alive, unlike anything I've ever heard before. Haven't been camping since, refusing every invitation from friends to return to the woods, even though I used to love such trips. Whenever someone mentions Chattahoochee, I feel a chill down my spine, as if that forest is whispering my name from afar. Now, living in a small apartment in Atlanta, I no longer hear streams or the wind through pine leaves, but sometimes I still hear that singing when it's quiet. Not just in dreams, but on silent nights when the city sleeps. It starts as a distant melody, then grows clearer. That same female voice singing lyrics I don't understand, but feels like it's calling me back, like a seductive invitation pulling me to the forest. I try to ignore it, turn on the TV or wear headphones, but the singing pierces through every sound, whispering in my ear, "Come here, stay with me." Recently, I looked back at photos from the trip, ones Jake took with his old camera. In one photo, behind my tent, there's a faint white shape, the figure of a woman with long hair flowing in the wind, though no one stood there that night. I zoomed in, heart pounding, and saw her empty eyes staring straight at me. I told Sarah, and she told me to destroy the photo, but I couldn't. Every time I look at it, I hear the singing clearer, like she knows I still have it. I've started dreaming of the forest every night, seeing myself walking through the fog to a clearing where Abigail Hart waits in a torn white dress, singing her song, waving me forward. Last summer, I visited my grandmother in a small town called Millfield, Ohio, where she lived alone in a 2-story wooden house from the Civil War era. This happened when I was staying at my grandma's old house, a place full of old keepsakes. From the ticking grandfather clock that echoed through the night to black and white photos on the wall, coated in the dust of time. My grandmother was a kind woman, always telling stories about the old days, but her house had something off, a heavy atmosphere, as if it held on to secrets no one wanted to mention. I slept in a small upstairs room, where the window overlooked an empty field, and every night I heard the creaking of wood, even though there was no wind. On the third night, after a long day helping my grandmother clean the attic, I stepped into the bathroom to wash my face before bed. The flickering fluorescent light overhead buzzed weakly, on the verge of going out, and I stood in front of the old mirror with its chipped wooden frame. One night I saw a shadow in the bathroom mirror, a faint dark figure standing just behind my shoulder, slightly taller than me, as still as a statue. I blinked, thinking I was tired. Thought it was just my reflection at first, just a distorted image from the bad lighting. But then it moved when I didn't. The shadow tilted, its head to the right, while I stood perfectly still, water dripping from my fingers into the sink. My heart pounded, my breath caught, and I felt a cold chill crawl down my spine, as if someone was right behind me, even though the mirror reflected a shadow that wasn't there in real life. I turned around, hands trembling as I flicked on the hallway light. But the space was empty. No one. Nothing except the steady tick of the grandfather clock downstairs. I looked back at the mirror, and the shadow was gone, leaving only my pale face in the flickering light. I told myself I imagined it. Maybe from the ghost story my grandmother told about soldiers dying in the nearby field. But the unease didn't go away. I locked the bathroom door, returned to my room, and lay in bed with the lamp on, trying to forget the eyes I swear I saw in that shadow. Black, bottomless, unreflective, staring straight at me. The next night, I tried to avoid looking in the mirror, but curiosity and fear mixed together and I couldn't help it. I stood at the sink, the light still flickering like it was teasing me, and the shadow appeared again. Clearer this time, not just a blur, but with outlines, like a tall, thin man in a long coat. I stood frozen, breath quickening, and I turned around, but nothing was there, just a blank wall and a towel hanging quietly in the corner. But when I looked back at the mirror, the shadow was still there, now closer, as if it had taken a step forward while I looked away. The shadow kept showing up every night after that, not just in the bathroom but in the hallway mirror, in the bedroom mirror. Every time I looked, it was there, those black, bottomless eyes watching me, never blinking. By the 5th day, I couldn't take it anymore. I went downstairs early in the morning, where my grandma was making coffee in an old kettle, and I told her everything. Told my grandma, and she said it's been there for years. Her voice calm, like she was talking about the weather. stirring her coffee steadily. She looked at me over her thick glasses, smiled softly, and she said it was harmless. Just ignore. It said that Shadow had been there since she was young, an invisible friend of the house that the family got used to. But I didn't believe her. The way it tilted its head, the way it seemed to get closer each night, it wasn't harmless. It didn't just stand there. It observed, waited, and I felt its presence even when I wasn't looking in the mirror. She added that my grandfather had seen it, and before him, her mother too. A nameless, originless shadow that appeared and disappeared without hurting anyone. But when I asked why it looked at me differently from the others, she only shrugged, told me not to think too much, that it would get bored and leave. I didn't say anything else, but when I went back to my room, I saw a smear on the mirror, like a handprint left behind, though I hadn't touched it. That night, the shadow didn't just stand. It raised its hand, as if trying to touch the glass, and I swear, I heard a raspy whisper behind me. "Stay." I ran downstairs to sleep on the living room sofa, but its eyes still haunted me, burned into my mind. I couldn't stay there any longer. That shadow wasn't just an image in the mirror. It was a living, cold, threatening presence. But it didn't feel harmless to me, despite what my grandmother said, because every time it appeared I felt a crushing pressure on my chest, like it wanted to pull me into its world. Sometimes it felt like it was watching me, not just through mirrors, but even in moments I wasn't looking. When I walked through the hallway, when I ate breakfast with my grandma, or when I lay on the sofa trying to sleep without closing my eyes. On the last night, it didn't just raise its hand. The shadow stepped out of the mirror, stood in the corner of the room, its black eyes staring straight at me, and I clearly heard the whisper, "You belong here." Moved out after a week, but still see it in mirrors sometimes. Even after I returned to my apartment in Columbus, hundreds of miles from Millfield, it appears in the bathroom mirror, the car mirror, even in the glass storefronts I walk past. Not often, but enough that I never feel safe. No idea what it was, but it freaked me out, and I started avoiding reflective surfaces, hanging towels over mirrors, turning off lights when not needed. But every time I accidentally look, the shadow is there, just a little closer, its deep eyes seeming to swallow me. Recently, I looked up my grandmother's house through the local library and found a story from 1863. A young soldier died in the field behind the house, never properly buried, and rumors say his spirit is tied to the house, appearing in old mirrors. I called my grandma, asked if she knew, but she just chuckled, said, "Every old house has its ghost." But this shadow wasn't just a ghost. It knew my name, it wanted me, and I started dreaming of myself standing in the field, it behind me, whispering the invitation to stay forever. In the fall of 2022, I bought a small house in the suburbs of St. Louis, Missouri, after many months of saving from my job as a programmer. This happened when I moved into my first house, a classic-style home with a sloping roof and peeling white paint, located at the end of a quiet road near a small forest. I loved its silence. No city noise, no noisy neighbors. just the rustling of leaves when the wind blew through the old oak trees in the yard. I spent the first week cleaning, arranging furniture, and turning the basement into a workspace with an old wooden desk and a few bright white LED lamps. But even on the first night I felt something was off. The air in the house was heavy, like someone was watching from the shadows. On the second night, after finishing an episode on Netflix, I turned off the TV and prepared for bed. Suddenly, I heard laughter coming from the basement one night. A child's laughter, echoing and high-pitched, as if someone was playing downstairs. I stopped in the middle of the staircase, listening. The laughter was continuous, not like a sound from a speaker or phone. Thought it was the TV or something at first. Maybe I forgot to turn something off. So I checked the living room, powered everything down, from the TV to the computer. But it kept going even after I turned everything off. The laughter continued, now clearer, as if it was coming from the basement door. An old wooden door I rarely opened, because it always gave off a musty, unpleasant smell. I stood in front of the door, gripping my phone tightly, telling myself it was probably the wind, through a crack or some animal sneaking in through a vent. But the laughter didn't sound natural. It had a rhythm, like a child humming a tune in the middle of joy, then suddenly stopping, leaving behind a heavy silence. I turned on the hallway light, looked down the pitch-black stairs to the basement, and felt an unusual cold air rising up, even though the heater was still running. I didn't dare go down right away. Instead, I locked the basement door, turned on all the lights in the house, and lay on the sofa with the TV blaring to drown out the growing fear inside me. The next night, I couldn't sleep, lying there listening to every small sound in the house, waiting for the laughter to return. And it did. Around 2 a.m., the laughter rang out again from the basement, louder this time, as if someone was running back and forth across the wooden floor. I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to confront it. I grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen, unlocked the basement door, and stepped down the stairs, each step creaking beneath my feet. Went down to check and it stopped. The moment I set foot on the cold concrete floor, the laughter stopped, leaving me in darkness lit only by the weak beam of the flashlight. I swept the light around the room. Nothing was there, just old junk. Only dusty cardboard boxes, a rusted bicycle, and some rotting wood piled in the corner. But the air in the basement wasn't normal. It was noticeably colder than upstairs, and I smelled something like damp earth mixed with metal. I checked every corner, even knocked on the walls to see if there were any hollow sounds, but found nothing to explain the laughter. When I turned back toward the stairs, a small click sound came from behind, like someone dropping a marble on the floor. I turned around, flashlight shining into the darkest corner, and for a moment I saw a small shadow dart across, quick as a blink, before disappearing behind the boxes. My heart pounded, but I didn't dare stay longer. Quickly ran up, locked the door, and told myself it was just a mouse or a hallucination. But I kept hearing it every few nights after that. Not regularly, but every few days. The laughter would return from the basement, sometimes accompanied by the sound of tiny footsteps running back and forth. I started avoiding going down there, piling stuff in front of the door like a useless barricade. One afternoon, while mowing the lawn, I told this story to Mr. Tom, an elderly neighbor who had lived next door for years. Told my neighbor, and he said the last owner heard it too. He nodded slowly, said the previous owner also moved out because of the laughter, and no one wanted to stay long in that house. He looked at me with a strange expression, as if he wanted to say more but stayed silent, only warning me to be careful when alone. The next day, I invited Mr. Tom over for coffee, pressed him to tell me more about the house. He sighed, looked out toward the forest and said it was a kid who died down there years ago. A boy named Billy, around 8 years old, who went missing in the basement in the 1950s when the first family lived there. They found him, a few days later, trapped under a collapsed pile of wood, but no one knew why he went down there alone. He said the laughter was Billy's trace, a harmless ghost, but I don't believe in ghosts. But it creeped me out. I don't believe in ghost stories, but the way the laughter echoed, high-pitched and full of life, didn't sound like anything I could explain with logic. I tried to stay, but each night the laughter grew clearer, sometimes with a child's humming, like a nursery rhyme warped by time. Once, when I went down to get something, I saw an old rubber ball roll out from the dark corner, stopping right at my feet, even though no one touched it. I screamed, threw the flashlight into the darkness, and ran up to lock the door, heart pounding like it was about to explode. Moved out after a few months, sold the house cheap to a new couple, didn't mention the laughter. I didn't want them to think I was crazy, but I still hear that laughter sometimes even now. Even in my new apartment in downtown St. Louis, when I sit alone at night, the laughter echoes from afar, like it's coming from the old basement. Recently, I looked up Billy through the local library. An old newspaper confirmed Mr. Tom's story, with a photo of the boy grinning widely, bright eyes full of life. But in my dreams I see him standing in the basement, not smiling but staring at me with empty eyes, pointing to the collapsed wood, whispering, "Come play with me." I woke up drenched in sweat, and since then, I haven't dared to sleep with the lights off. The laughter isn't just a sound, it's an invitation, a thread pulling me back to that house, where Billy still waits for someone to join him in the dark. In the winter of 2023, I moved into a small apartment on the 3rd floor of an old building in Portland, Oregon, after getting a new job at a local tech company. This happened when I was living alone in an apartment, a place with long hallways, lit by flickering neon lights and the smell of old paint clinging to the walls. I enjoyed the independence of living alone. No roommates, no one to bother me. Just me, an old armchair I bought from a flea market, and the sound of rain tapping steadily on the window each night. The apartment wasn't big, just one bedroom, a small living room, and a cramped kitchen, but I felt comfortable in my own space. At least for the first few days. Everything started on the third morning after I moved in. I woke up, made coffee, and got ready for work. But when I stepped outside, I noticed something strange. The front door was unlocked. Kept finding the front door unlocked every morning. Not just once, but for several days in a row. Even though I was sure I had locked it with the key before going to bed. At first, I blamed myself. Thought I forgot to lock it at first. Maybe I was tired from long work days or distracted, still adjusting to a new routine. But after the third time, I began to doubt it. I'm not forgetful. And the lock was solid, not the kind that just pops open. To be sure, I started checking it every night before bed, standing at the door, turning the key twice, pulling the handle to test it, even recording my voice saying locked on my phone as reassurance. But the next morning the door was still open, not ajar, but completely unlocked, as if someone had turned the key from the inside. I checked the windows, the floors, everything. No footprints, no smudges, no signs of forced entry. I began to feel a chill every time I stepped through the threshold, like someone was standing right behind me. But when I turned around, the hallway was always empty, the flickering neon light casting shadows like a silent warning. After a week, I couldn't take it anymore. The fear mixed with frustration pushed me to figure out what was happening. But no matter what I did, still found it open no matter what. Every morning I woke up, the lock sat still as if untouched. The doorknob, cold beneath my hand. I began inspecting everything closely each time. Nothing was missing, nothing seemed out of place, no item disturbed on the carpet or wooden floor, like no one had ever entered. But that perfection made me more anxious. If it wasn't a burglar, if no one had broken in, then what was unlocking my door each night? I called the landlord, a middle-aged man named Carl who lived on the bottom floor of the building. I told him everything, my voice shaking as I asked if someone else had a spare key. Asked my landlord, he said no one else had a key. He frowned, insisting I was the only one with access, and that the lock had been replaced before I moved in. He even joked that maybe I was sleepwalking, but I caught a flicker of concern in his eyes as he looked up the stairs toward my apartment. I don't believe in sleepwalking. I've never had a history of it, and I was always fully conscious when checking the door. Determined not to let it continue, I bought a chain lock from a nearby hardware store and installed it on the front door. A stronger layer of protection than the standard lock. Started locking it with a chain, but it still opened. The next morning, not only was the deadbolt undone, but the chain was also unlatched, lying loose on the floor like some sick joke. I installed a small camera in the living room, aimed directly at the door, but when I reviewed the footage, it only showed static around 3 a.m. Then the door opening slowly for a few seconds, with no figure appearing. I started hearing faint hissing noises near the door on quiet nights, like a strangled sigh. And every time I passed by, I felt a cold touch brush the back of my neck, even though there was nothing there. I couldn't keep living in that fear. One night after checking the door one last time, I had just dozed off when I heard footsteps outside the door. Slow, deliberate, like someone pacing right outside my apartment. The steps were heavy, unlike those of a normal person, dragging, as if they were purposefully stopping at my door. I sat up, heart pounding, and ran to the door, pressing my eye to the peephole. Looked through the peephole, but no one was there. The hallway was empty, the flickering neon light still pulsing faintly. But the footsteps didn't stop. They echoed right outside, as if someone was standing inches away from me. I didn't dare open the door. Instead, I stood frozen, listening, and then the hissing returned, louder this time, like someone breathing through a constricted throat. I turned on the lights, checked the camera. Again, just static, with only the sound of footsteps and hissing layered in the darkness. The next morning, the door was open again, the chain lying on the floor, and this time, I saw a small scratch on the frame. Not deep, but enough to prove something had been there. I packed my things that day, moved out after that, never figured it out. Handed the key back to Carl without explanation. Just wanting to leave as fast as I could. Now living in a new apartment a few miles outside of Portland, I still can't shake that feeling. Still don't feel safe locking doors now. Every time I turn the key, I hear that faint hiss in the back of my mind, like a reminder that it's still out there, waiting. Recently, I looked up the old building on a local forum. People say, a man on the 3rd floor disappeared years ago. No one ever found out what happened to him. Only that he used to stand in the hallway at night. In my dreams, I see a tall, thin figure standing outside my door, gently tapping on the glass, whispering my name. And every morning I wake up, I check the door, afraid it'll be open again. Last winter, I rented a small cabin in the Adirondack Mountains of New York to escape the hustle of city life and focus on a personal writing project. This happened when I was staying at a cabin in the woods, a remote place with moss-covered wooden walls, a low slanted roof, and no other houses for miles around. I loved that isolation. Just the sound of wind rushing through the pines, the crackling fire in the hearth, and the pale moonlight shining through the large window in the living room. I brought my laptop, a few books, and some canned food, planning to stay for a week to enjoy the peace of wild nature. The first night passed peacefully. I sat by the fireplace, typing late into the night, with only the sound of creaking wood as the outside temperature gradually dropped. But on the second night, just as I turned off the lights and got ready for bed, a strange sound broke the silence. Heard tapping on the window late at night. A soft, steady tapping, like someone gently scratching the glass coming from the window behind the cabin. I paused, listening. Thought it was just a branch or something. Maybe a tree limb blown by the wind knocking against the window, so I pulled back the curtain to check. But outside there was nothing but the dense darkness of the forest. And yet it kept going in a pattern like someone knocking, not random but with a clear rhythm. 3 short taps, a pause, then repeating, like a deliberate signal from someone. I turned on the porch light, looked through the glass, but didn't see any branches close enough to touch the window. The area around the cabin had been cleared, with only bare ground and a few low shrubs. The tapping continued, now a little louder, as if someone was testing my patience. I told myself it was probably an animal, a bird or a squirrel, but unease began to creep in, raising goosebumps on my skin in the cold of the mountain night. I shut the curtain tightly, turned up the heat and tried to sleep, but the tapping didn't stop, like a voiceless whisper slipping through the wooden walls, lasting until I fell asleep from exhaustion and anxiety. On the third night, I decided not to let the tapping control me anymore. I lay in bed waiting, and as expected, the tapping returned. This time stronger, like someone using their fingers to knock firmly on the glass. I jumped up, grabbed a flashlight and pulled back the curtain again. Looked outside, and nothing was there. Just the darkness wrapping around the forest, no sign of any branch or animal near the window. I checked more carefully. No trees close enough to touch the window. The nearest tree line was at least 10 meters away, too far for anything natural to be the cause. But the tapping didn't stop. It repeated with the same rhythm. 3 short knocks, pause, repeat, like an invitation from the dark. I put on a coat, laced up my boots, and stepped outside, determined to figure out what was going on. The night was freezing, my breath forming white clouds in the air, and the flashlight beam swept over the dewy ground. No footprints, no trampled grass, nothing. I stood directly beneath the window, listening, and the tapping came again, now from above, as if someone was knocking from inside the cabin. My heart pounded. I ran around the house, checked every corner, but saw no one. Only the wind, whistling through the trees, blending with the steady tapping. Kept happening every night I stayed there. Not just that night, but the ones after too. No matter how I tried to ignore or investigate, the tapping returned, like it was part of the cabin itself. On the 5th day, I called the cabin's owner, an older man named Ed who lived a few hours' drive away. I told him about the tapping, my voice trembling slightly, as I asked if anyone else had reported something similar. Told the owner, he said it's been like that for years. He chuckled softly over the phone, saying the tapping was a feature of the cabin, something that had been there long before he bought the place. He added that no one really knew what it was, but it had never hurt anyone, just made a few guests leave early. I asked if there was a way to stop it, but he only shrugged through his voice, telling me to enjoy the retreat. But right after the call ended, I heard the tapping again, right behind me, even though I was sitting in the middle of the room several feet from the window. I pushed Ed further during our next call, and he reluctantly shared one chilling detail. Said it might be an old tenant who died there, a man who lived alone in the cabin during the 1970s, disappeared into the woods one freezing winter night, and all they ever found were his shoes near the rear window. Ed said the tapping might be his hello, a trapped spirit. but his voice wavered slightly when he said it. Didn't sleep much after that. I lay on the couch, eyes fixed on the window, listening to the steady tapping, now joined by a faint scraping like fingernails brushing against glass. I didn't dare look outside again, afraid that this time I might see a face in the dark. On the last night, the tapping became frantic, no longer rhythmic, but as if someone was pounding the window hard enough to make the glass tremble in its wooden frame. I turned on the lights, shouted to chase away the fear, but when I rushed to the window, I saw a faint mark, like a small, damp handprint pressed on the outside glass, even though I was alone in the middle of the woods. I packed up immediately, left early and haven't gone back. Drove back to the city that night, not caring about the remainder of the rental agreement, but still hear tapping sometimes when I'm alone. Even in my new apartment in Brooklyn, when I'm writing late at night, the tapping echoes from the 5th floor window, where no one could possibly reach. Recently, I looked into the cabin, through a local website. People say the man didn't just disappear, but had lived in isolation, often tapping on the windows to call out to passers-by, though no one ever came. In my dreams, I see him standing outside the cabin, pale face pressed to the glass, tapping steadily, empty eyes staring right at me, whispering, "Come inside." I wake with the tapping still echoing in my head, and since then, every time I hear the wind against the windows, I check the curtains, afraid it's not just the wind. In the summer of 2023, I and 3 college friends decided to go camping in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, Tennessee, to celebrate our graduation a few years back. This happened when I was camping with friends, in a remote campsite, beside a small stream, where the sound of flowing water blended with the buzzing of insects each night. We pitched our tents beneath towering oak trees, lit a campfire, roasted marshmallows, and shared funny stories until the flames faded. I always loved camping, the feeling of freedom in nature, the faint scent of burning wood, and the starry sky undimmed by city lights. The first night was perfect, and I fell asleep to the sound of laughter from my friends. But on the second night, when I woke up in the middle of the night feeling thirsty, something gave me chills. Saw eyes glowing in the dark outside my tent, 2 pale greenish lights hovering about 1 meter off the ground, just outside the thin fabric of my tent. They didn't blink, didn't move, just glowed strangely in the thick forest darkness. Thought it was an animal at first, maybe a deer or a fox with moonlight reflecting in its eyes, so I lay still, watching through a small slit in the tent flap. But then I realized something odd. But they didn't move, just stared at me. No footsteps, no rustling leaves, just those glowing eyes staring directly at me, unmoving like gems trapped in space. I stayed silent, not wanting to wake my friends, but my heart pounded in my chest. I tried to reason. Maybe it was just exhaustion, or light from the dying fire reflecting off something. But when I shifted slightly for a better look, the eyes were still there, unmoving, as if they knew I was watching. I zipped up the tent, lay back down and tried to sleep, but the feeling of being watched didn't go away. When morning came, I checked around the tent. No footprints, no marks, just dew on the grass and birds chirping like any normal day. I told myself it was my imagination, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. On the third night, I decided to confront those eyes. I lay in my tent waiting, and just as I expected, they appeared again. Two pale green lights, brighter now, as if they were getting closer each night. I grabbed my flashlight from the sleeping bag, took a deep breath, and turned it on, shining it straight through the tent fabric. Shined my flashlight and nothing was there. The light cut through the dark, sweeping across the outside area. But there was nothing. No animals, no figure, just still bushes and damp earth under the beam. But when I turned the light off, the eyes reappeared, right in the same spot, as if the light had no effect on them at all. From that point on, kept seeing them every night after that. Not just once, but regularly every night as darkness fell. The eyes appeared, always in the same spot outside the tent, always staring directly at me. I started losing sleep, my eyes sunken from stress. And on the fourth day, I told the group over breakfast by the fire. Told my friends they didn't see anything. All three just shrugged, saying they slept deeply and heard nothing strange, even teasing me for imagining things after reading too many horror stories before the trip. I tried to laugh along, but deep down, I knew this wasn't imagination. Those eyes were too real, too vivid, like they had their own awareness. On the fifth night, everything got worse. I was trying to fall asleep when I realized the eyes were no longer far away. One night they got closer to the tent, now just inches from the fabric, glowing so brightly I could see them through the tent without unzipping. I heard light rustling in the grass, then a faint shadow moved past, tall and thin, not shaped like any forest animal I knew. I turned the flashlight on again, but the beam hit only empty space, and when I turned it off, the eyes were back, closer than ever, as if they were pressed right against the tent, waiting for me to come out. I clutched my sleeping bag, not daring to breathe hard, and prayed for morning to come quickly. The last night in the forest was the peak of terror. I lay curled up in the tent, the green eyes now so close I could feel warmth from them seeping through the thin fabric. Then I heard breathing right outside the fabric, a raspy, slow inhale and exhale, as if someone was pressing their face against the tent, breathing right into my ear. I didn't dare move, didn't dare scream, just held my flashlight, like a useless weapon. The breathing lasted for minutes, mingling with the sound of grass being pressed down, and the eyes didn't go away. They glowed brightly, as if trying to pierce through the tent to reach me. I whispered prayers, wishing dawn would come faster. When the sun rose, I didn't wait for my friends to wake. I took down my tent, threw everything into the car, and left the next morning. Didn't sleep much. Driving home exhausted, my vision blurry from lack of sleep and fear. My friends thought I was overreacting, but I didn't care. I just wanted to get away from that forest, away from the eyes and the unexplainable breathing. But it didn't end there. Still see those eyes sometimes in my backyard, even after I returned to my small house in the suburbs of Knoxville. Those green eyes appeared among the bushes behind the house on moonless nights, watching me through the kitchen window. unmoving and cold just like the first time. I looked up the campsite online and found an old story. A hunter went missing in the Smoky Mountains in the 1980s, leaving only his gun and a pair of shoes near a stream. People say he didn't die, but was kept by the forest, wandering in the darkness with unusually glowing eyes. No idea what it was, but it freaked me out. And now, every time I hear the sound of insects chirping outside, I glance at the window, afraid those eyes will be there, a little closer with that raspy breathing calling me back to the forest. Last summer we journeyed through 22 stories, 22 doors slightly ajar, leading into the hidden corners of the world, where light can't reach and darkness whispers secrets no one wants to hear. From the echoing laughter of a child in a St. Louis basement, the unlocked door in Portland, the tapping on the Adirondack cabin window, to the glowing green eyes in the Smoky Mountains. Each story was a piece of a puzzle, a warning, or perhaps an invitation from something we're not meant to see. Have you ever wondered what lies behind those sounds, those eyes, those unexplainable signs? I have too. And the more I tell these stories, the more I realize a chilling truth. These tales aren't random. They're connected, threaded by something invisible, fragile but sharp as a blade. Think about it. In each story, there's always a moment when the narrator realizes they're not alone. Down in the basement, little Billy didn't just laugh. He wanted someone to stay and play. Outside the unlocked door, the rasping breath of something unseen was searching for someone to let it in. On the cabin window, the man who vanished decades ago knocked like a trapped soul trying to be remembered. And deep in the woods, the green eyes never blinked, never moved, as if they had chosen you long before you ever stepped foot there. These entities, or whatever they are, don't just show up and leave. They leave a mark, a scar in the mind, a lasting echo, like laughter that follows you home, tapping that lingers in your dreams, or breathing you swear you still hear in your quietest nights. I can't help but ask myself, do they ever really go away? Or are they still out there, watching, quietly, waiting for that one moment when you let your guard down, when you turn off the light, when you tell yourself, it was just a scary story? These storytellers, they moved out, they left the house, the apartment, the woods. But none of them ever truly escaped. The laughter still echoes in a new apartment in St. Louis. The door still chills them to the bone, even miles away from Portland. The tapping still reaches the fifth-floor window in Brooklyn, and the glowing eyes still flicker behind the bushes in Knoxville. Maybe the most terrifying thing isn't what they saw in the dark, but what the dark saw in them. Crack, a fear, a door left slightly open. But you know what truly haunts me after telling these 22 stories? It's not the supernatural figures, not the sounds, not the eyes. It's the silence between the horror. When you're waiting for the next sound, when you stare into the dark and wonder, is it staring back? That silence is where real fear grows. Where your imagination paints faces, hands, and twisted smiles no light can ever erase. And if you listen closely, right now, in your own room, do you hear it? A soft hiss from the corner? A faint tapping on the window? Or just your own breathing, faster than it was a few minutes ago? These 22 stories, they're not an ending. They're a beginning. The first pieces of a much bigger, much darker picture that we haven't fully seen yet. There are hundreds, thousands of other stories out there waiting to be told. Houses that still keep secrets under rotten floorboards. Forests that still whisper in a language no one understands. And eyes, always watching, never blinking, never sleeping. I believe every horror story is a reminder that the world we live in doesn't belong to just us. That something else has always been out there, just beyond the threshold, just behind the glass, just beneath the shadow you walked through. So what will you do after hearing these stories? Turn off the light and forget them? Or let them slip into your dreams tonight? I won't promise you an answer. I'm not sure I want to know it myself. But I can promise you this. There's more coming. More stories to make your heart race. To make you glance over your shoulder when you pass a mirror. To make you wonder if that door you just locked is really locked. So if you don't want to miss what's next, hit that follow button right now. We've only scratched the surface of the darkness. There's much more waiting ahead. Stories colder, darker, more twisted, and you won't be able to look away. Picture this. Next time you're sitting alone on a moonless night and you hear a sound, a laugh, a knock, a breath. What will you think it is? Just the wind? Just your imagination? Or a sign that you have become part of the next story? Follow the channel to find out. To walk with me through the darkest corners of this world, where the unexplainable waits in silence. Don't let yourself be left alone in the dark. Let us lead you, story by story, until you can no longer tell what's real and what's just a nightmare. Thank you for being here today, and I'll see you in the next video, if you dare to return.